Democrats, the Dem machine, has been importing so many people, bringing in so many illegals, flying in with this like CBP border app thing nobody even knew about, like secret program. That's illegal, basically. It's illegal, but there's no action by DOJ to actually to stop it from happening. They're transporting large numbers of illegals to swing states. If you look at the numbers, these are the numbers from the government website. So, like from the Democrat-administered government website, there are triple-digit increases in illegals to all the swing states, and in some cases, it's like 700% over the last 3 years. Now, these swing state margins are, sometimes 10, 20,000 votes. So, what happens if you put hundreds of thousands of people into each swing state? When somebody is granted asylum, they can get a green card, and then 5 years after the green card, they can get citizenship and they can fully legally vote. And when they do so, they vote overwhelmingly Democrat. So my prediction is if there's another 4 years of a Dem administration, they will legalize so many illegals that are there that the next election, there won't be any swing states.
Is there a case for what Elon Musk said? Is it possible that this may be our last real election? How do you make such a case that this may be our last real election? Perhaps we start with the most obvious question. Why is Kamala Harris the Democratic nominee for president? Is it because she is the best candidate? In a way, she is, but not in the way you think. Just ask yourself, how did she become the Democratic nominee for president? How did she become the head of the 2024 Democratic ticket without getting one vote from nearly 50 million citizens who are registered Democrats? The answer is simple. Those who are in power and control the Democratic Party made it so. Like a magician, they waved their magic wand and uttered abracadabra. Then, in a puff of smoke, Joe Biden disappeared and Kamala took his place. Who are these magicians? Who are these puppet masters that are pulling the strings and subverting the will of the people? They are corporations and agencies whose power and control has corrupted our body politic and has been slowly taking away our government and making it their government. Central banks, the military-industrial machine, big tech, big pharma, big ag, and big oil. These power brokers have siphoned trillions of dollars off our government through tax breaks, subsidies, and/or regulatory benefits, and work very hard to assure their spigot of favoritism and money never gets turned off. Central banks want us to be in more and more debt as they debase our currencies and saddle us with a national debt that is over $35 trillion that we will never be able to pay off. The military-industrial complex wants endless wars. Think about it. The US military has been actively involved in warfare, either directly or indirectly, ever since 1950. Big Pharma wants us to continuously depend on their prescriptions. They like a world in which there are always states of perpetual crisis, where they can keep selling us drugs while making huge profits. Big agriculture is a monopoly of 10 major companies that control over 70% of the food supply of the United States. They don't like competition and always enjoy higher profits when disasters strike. There is big oil and big tobacco that love to profit off our addictions. And too many politicians on both sides of the aisle have partnered with these power brokers for too many decades. And because our politicians are beholden to these benefactors, we the people find our elected congressional representatives do not work on our behalf. We are finally at a tipping point where we the people will no longer determine our fate through the vote. Just look at the facts. Our representatives continually spend us into more and more debt, which is now looking to hit $40 trillion. How our representatives continually support unwinnable wars. How our representatives continually do nothing to fix the border and flood our market with cheap labor. How our representatives continually do nothing to fix the rising costs of healthcare. And how our representatives in the last 5 years have let Big Pharma and Big Tech strip away our freedom of speech and pump us full of drugs. I do not say these things lightly, as we watch our middle-class erode and our standard of living continuously fall. It is very disturbing to watch this play out and see how Americans suffer. And yet, we the people are blind to how we continue to vote for these congressional and presidential candidates into office who are owned by and work on behalf of the puppet masters. How do you think a candidate gets money to run and win the primary level? and by the time we get the general election, many of the candidates we are voting for, regardless if they are Republican or Democrat, are already beholden to the power brokers. These puppet masters profit too much to allow a candidate of the people to get elected into any key positions of government, especially the presidency. For example, they made sure RFK Jr. had no chance of winning even before the Democratic primaries began. They worked to have the governing rules of the Democratic primaries changed in order to effectively eliminate any chances of him winning the Democrat presidential nomination. And the power of these puppet masters has grown so much in recent years to the point that they even think they can brazenly subvert the results of a free election. You ever wondered why Biden was forced off the presidential ticket? This is the power these power brokers now wield. It makes me ask, are we witnessing our country changing from a republic to an oligarchy? In the previous video that TVN published called The Silent Coup, we took you through the step-by-step actions the puppet masters took to install Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee for president. Please take the time to watch and like that video. The link is down below. Prior to the 2016 election, the puppet masters felt their power was beyond question. They felt the government served them and that the American people were blind to their consolidation of power. Then the unthinkable happened and Trump got elected. Then suddenly in the middle of the Trump presidency, he is impeached, while at the same time, a pandemic is released upon the world. I want to make it clear that I am not advocating for President Trump. I'm just pointing out the facts. I'm not saying these power brokers were behind the impeachment trials of Trump or caused the pandemic, but these are suspicious happenstances. We need to think about, why would our Congress impeach our president twice during a critical time of crisis? Does that seem to make any sense? Or does it? The puppet masters are no fools to let no crisis go to waste, especially if it is in their best interest. With COVID, it seemed like overnight our election process was turned upside down. In the midst of a pandemic, the integrity of our vote was laid waste in a very coordinated attack. The pandemic spurred government censorship so that people's fear of COVID could be amplified. Well-known doctors in the field of virology were silenced. Any person who wanted to discuss what we were doing as a nation were instantly demonized. Our government mandated the shutdown of non-essential businesses for 2 weeks, which turned into almost 2 years. Governors used emergency powers to disrupt the lives of their citizens, especially young and elderly. And in this midst of this chaos, the final chess move was made in which our elected leaders unilaterally mandated mail-in ballots. And during this awful time, the mainstream news never questioned these unprecedented overreaches of power. In fact, they favored them in extreme complicity. And then, the final nail was the race riots that were unleashed to further sow more chaos. By the time we were finally lifting the COVID restrictions, the transformation that the puppet master wanted was nearly complete. The single goal of undermining the integrity of our nation's elections was almost at hand. And the nation divided and tearing itself apart was a little more than acceptable collateral damage. Now that we have the backstory, we find ourselves in the midst of the final act as the 2024 election nears its end on November 5th. We find ourselves troubled by the extremism that has been played out so far in this unbelievable election cycle. The lawfare that was unleashed on the former president, which was unprecedented in American history. This was clearly a tactic by the oligarchs to weaponize our government to exhaust Trump's resources and time, while spinning a message that he is unfit for the office of presidency, not only to destroy his chances of winning the election, but also to destroy the movement and supporters who believe in making America great again. However, the puppet masters underestimated the will of the American people as support for Trump grew. Then there was the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, which by no coincidence followed the Supreme Court ruling of the presidential immunity. Why was this ruling by the Supreme Court so important? It literally blew a huge hole through most of the illegal cases brought against the former president. Please click the link below if you want to see more about our take on the Trump assassination attempt. At this point, the puppet masters felt they had no choice when they overplayed their hand, swapping out Biden for Kamala. Now it was in the light for all to see that there was a ruling class of oligarchs and corporations who didn't want true, free elections, especially if it threatens their agenda and goals. Next, the power brokers used their media lapdogs to try and impact the presidential and vice presidential debates. The bias of the moderators was too obvious in favoring one candidate over the other. Again, the tactic deployed by the puppet masters seemed to yield the opposite result as Americans got further evidence of the corruption happening in our nation. Here we are in the home stretch, weeks away from determining who will be the next president of the United States. These are the weeks and days in which the puppet masters will use all their tricks in their arsenal to get desired outcome they want. And believe me, they still have plenty of tricks up their sleeve. In many swing states, we are finding the voter rolls are not accurate and in some cases absolutely worthless. What are voter rolls? Voter rolls contain the names, addresses, and signatures of the people who can vote in the coming election. Federal law mandates that states keep these rolls clean and accurate as this is the biggest vulnerability for mass election fraud. However, the Secretary of State, whose primary duty is to keep the voter rolls accurate, and many of the swing states seem to lack their duties. Non-profit and non-partisan organizations try to keep these elected officials honest by querying the voter rolls in advance of an election. However, red tape and political shenanigans prevent these organizations from getting the data in a timely manner in order to clean up the voter rolls before the next election. For example, Arizona's Secretary of State only recently released the voter rolls in which was identified that there was over 200,000 people on their voter rolls in which their citizenship was unclear. Pennsylvania voter rolls were found to be outdated and inaccurate, in which 300,000 names on the list were identified as people who have moved out of the state and should have been removed. Additionally, in Pennsylvania, these nonpartisan organizations found that nearly 80,000 non-citizens were on the voter rolls. Wisconsin, whose Secretary of State had been reluctant to give over the information on voter rolls, is facing many of the same issues as Arizona and Pennsylvania. I could go on, but why is this an issue? Without accurate voter rolls, we will find the pillar that supports election integrity is eroded. Before COVID, people had to go and vote in person and show some form of ID that would be checked against the voter rolls before receiving a ballot. However, with mail-in ballots, the importance of the voter rolls has gone up exponentially, as the only check is the signature. And when we speak about the signature verification process, we find ourselves in an even bigger mess. Furthermore, many states permit drop boxes and allow ballot harvesting. These are very problematic if voter rolls are not accurate and there is no valid signature verification process in place. Lastly, let's see the problem is identified in a timely manner and the state legislators and governor want to fix these issues. We will find the media lapdogs unleashed to paint these new state bills as intimidation tactics and racist. When I say the puppet masters still have the tools in their arsenal to swing the election in their favor, I was not kidding. With all this information, I believe Elon Musk has a case for this truly being our last election.